3 days on road, we have a full day on track. We have 9 cars, 5 judges, probably get through a fair few tyres as well.
It's a bit of a tradition, isn't it now? It's more than 25 years of doing them, but I think it's our chance to celebrate the year.
A sort of snapshot of where we are in the whole motoring landscape, having all of those disparate cars that you would never have in a group test otherwise.
So we've got an incredible hot hatch here, we've got an estate car, we've got a 600 horsepower hybrid supercar. There's a little bit of everything.
We get to get back all of the great cars that we've driven, gathering them all together and finding a winner. Best car of the year.
There's a lot of anticipation at the start of the week. You know the list of cars that are going to be there, and when you see them in the car park together, I think that's always quite a special moment. You've got to try and have a completely open mind at that point. By definition, they're in the test, so they should all be in with a chance.
You need to get a good mix of roads, and if it rains, that's great, because that's an extra element.
Some of them might excel on some of the really twisty, bumpy bits. Some of them might excel on the faster and flowing bits.
Scenery, obviously need that as well for all the photography, and just adds something to the atmosphere, I think.
I think the MX-5 is a little star, actually. You don't even have to be driving it, you can be following it. And it's surprising how much pace it'll carry, but you can sort of see the body language of a car being driven well on a good road, and that car just looks brilliant fun. It like leans into the corners and just whips through sequences of corners because it's so small and so light. So you can be behind it in maybe the Aston Martin, and you can come right up to it on the straights, but then as soon as you get to the corners, it'll carry the same speed as you can, so or more if it's tight and twisty. It's making quite heavy weather of getting up this mountain, but when you've got a bit of speed up and you're in one of the tighter corners, it's just there for you. It's there in the palm of your hand. It gives you lots of options. This car loves this kind of section of road where they're in third gear, less than 60 miles an hour. And you can just drive it just on the edge of its grip, just beyond the edge of its grip. But it's such an innocent, approachable car. I'm sure some of you might be asking why we've got an MX-5 on Car of the Year. They've been around forever, decades and decades and decades. This year, this car's had quite a number of revisions, so they've made some improvements to the steering, and there's a limited slip diff as well, amongst some other detailed changes. So whilst the basic recipe is very familiar, there's lots to discover about this car. Immediately it feels just a little bit more together, feel a little bit more connected to the car. I'm sure we'll come to appreciate the limited slip diff a bit later on through some of these hairpins.
Mazda was a car I got into straight away, the first car I drove actually, and that instantly everything just felt right in terms of seating position, pedal position, the steering weight was lovely, and all those things. And so before you've even got in sort of further into how it really handles, you think this has got a good chance because it's doing all those really important things that we look for in a car really well. Even after driving all the other cars here and wondering whether that first drive in this, I was perhaps misremembering. Perhaps it wasn't that good, but it was. Getting back into it, even after everything else, wasn't in any way a disappointment. The chassis on this is hilarious, but brilliant. It rides nicely, and you've got enough travel and lean in it that you can really enjoy weight transfers all the way through a corner. It's light, agile, Its feedback, wonderful. Road, it doesn't give me a huge amount of confidence in terms of the feel you get back from the steering, and it's still quite stiff at the rear end, but it sounds amazing. I had some really good drives in it, and it's by far and away the best looking car on this test. I think it's just stunning. You'd love to live with one. It's just such a good looking thing. So handsome, so muscular, and it drives really well as well. You've got a big thick steering wheel, which I'm not a huge fan of. It's like the BMW to that extent, and it feels like it should be a car that you muscle around. The gear shifts are pretty good. It's got an automatic gearbox, but the shifts are relatively snappy. I would still like a dual clutch, just because this is meant to be the out and out driver's car of the Aston range, and so that bit more sense of connection would be nice. I love the fact that though when you do start pushing this, it doesn't get scrappy, and you realise there's a whole other dimension to this.
It's tricky when you drive a car in isolation. Sometimes it feels absolutely fantastic, but then you drive it back to back with other cars, and either it feels even better than that, or it kind of fades slightly and you can start to notice flaws you wouldn't otherwise spot. So I'm kind of intrigued to see where the Aston Martin is going to shape out.
Yeah, it's a car with a lot of character. It's got a bit of an old school kind of GT / sports car / muscle car vibe to it. There is a lovely solid feel to this car. I just feel like it's kind of hewn from solid. Oh man, and it's got the power and the torque to just keep spinning the wheels all the way up the hill if you want. It's on your side, but you're still the one driving it. You feel that you're the one making the difference. It's not just computers doing it for you. But I'm lucky to be on this road, in this car, in this company. And that's what these cars like this are about. They're emotional things. And if you were going to spend, I think the list price for this car starts at something like £165,000. It's a lot of money now. It's a serious bit of kit and a serious investment. So if you're going to make sacrifices to put something like this in your life, it should make your life better, and it should make every day really special. And I think this car does.
There's a temptation to think that having a big estate car in a test like this is just sort of there for a bit of differentiation, sort of visual interest. But this is really quite special. We've had them in the past, and they're good to have a different shape, and it's nice to have things like that in there. They're worthy of being there, and it really feels like it. As soon as I went through the first sort of set of hairpins, you just think this is not like any Audi estate I've driven. It's big, you know, it's got long wheelbase, but it feels short and nimble, and it turns in. The rear steering works brilliantly. So no real upgrades to the powertrain, but we've got passive dampers in here. But what they've done to the centre, and I think the rear diff as well, the sport diff at the rear, has made it so agile. The steering's quite light, but it's sort of like the BMW CS models in terms of that lightness that still gives you confidence and feedback and lets you know exactly what the car is doing. This is extraordinary. It looks like a rally support car, but it looks like it drives like the rally support car that would beat the actual rally car. And I think if Audi had entered an estate into rallying like Volvo entered an estate into the British Touring Car Champions, that feels like it sort of would pay tribute to that. And yeah, just what a thing.
Once you get it up to pace, you can't escape the feeling of mass. But blimey, it doesn't half go. The hairpins, really tight hairpins, you think wouldn't suit it. But if you hold third, I think it was, and nail it almost before you see the apex, it just like a cork out of a bottle. It's more involving than you might think a big, 800 horsepower Audi is. But do I love it? I fell in love with the M5 CS after a few miles on a really difficult road when we were doing Car of the Year in Scotland. I mean, it's probably not much bigger than the M5. I'm not sure what it is, but it just feels, I feel the mass. For such a big car, it feels really agile. Got enormous great brakes on it, so you've got confidence into the hairpins. But it just turns in so well. It's instantly, all that luggage space behind you just comes round. It would be nice if there was a little bit more V8, a little less gas rush to it in terms of the soundtrack, but that's the modern way of things, sadly. This really does have more than a whiff of Mitsubishi Evo about it, which is not something I expected. The way this drives actually makes me like the way it looks. That's how good it is.
Heading up to those roads at the top of the Pyrenees, the ST was just sublime, really. It felt I was picking up from where I left off in the GT3 RS last year. Felt very familiar in some respects with that engine, but obviously the manual gearbox, but you also don't have the configurability.
Much of it based around that wonderful flat six hung out the back. It's just, I don't think we've got anywhere near 9,000 on it yet, but wow. Such a compelling package. Of course, manual as well. Being old Luddites, we do like a manual gear shift, but it just makes the drive when you're not going for it on track, up in the hills. It's a question of what's more spectacular, this car or the scenery.
There's a little bit of an adjustment, I think, in driving it. I love the focus of it, and I just, every time I get in those cars, they just fit you like a glove, and you just connect with it immediately in ways that other cars struggle to do. But I'm quite surprised at how there's some lack of refinement in it. It's quite raw. You know, there's quite a lot of engine noise with the carbon clutch. There's quite a lot of chatter from the gearbox. You know, when you're sat idling and stuff. So there's certain aspects of it that are quite hardcore, but generally speaking, it's quite fierce. I'm not quite sure where it sits in my head. Yeah, a little bit of me, when I got in this car and went for my first good drive in it, it was like, here we go again. It's so good at so many things. It's a standing joke that we're massive Porsche fanboys at Evo, and we are, but only because the cars are so good. You know, when they've not been quite to our taste, or they haven't worked on the roads that we want to drive, specifically the GT4 RS, you know, we weren't massive fans of that. You know, so we do criticise cars where we think they deserve it, but the 911 just seems like such a fabulous recipe.
Pretty impressed. First go of the Yaris. More like a performance car than a rally car, if you see what I mean. A road car than a rally car. The original was quite a fluid car, quite a bit of roll. First drive on the road, all the richness of that car was there. The three-cylinder engine is stronger and smoother, and the chassis is just more responsive. got plenty of grip and it pushes on when you reach the limit of grip. It hangs on and then pushes wide. But I think it should be really handy on these very twisty roads. Short wheelbase, so it likes to turn. But it feels very, very polished on these roads, very well damped. Initially very grippy on these Michelins. It's a very willing, very agile little car. Certainly a contrast with some of the bigger, more potent coupes.
So the Toyota GR Yaris is a bit of an Evo favourite. We all loved the original generation car, which impressed us so much. Fully deserves all the hype. It is a true modern classic and a bit of a legend in its own lifetime.
You can just tell this car's been developed by people who really love driving and understand driving and understand what makes a good performance car. Everything that was great about the original GR Yaris is still here, just the good bits are better. You can feel its rally roots for sure.
I've just jumped in the Morgan to make the most of the sunshine. It's such a joyful car. Everything about it just makes you smile as soon as you walk up to it. Just the modesty of it, really. It's a brand new car, but it could be anything from 1950s onwards, really, which is completely unique, I think, with the Morgan. I love the fact the Morgan's here. It's such a charming car. Like even just thinking about it, it makes me smile. When you look at it, it's just a car you just want to have a look at it and jump in, and it looks so different to everything else and feels so different when you're sat in it. And their relationship with BMW means they've got access to some impressive powertrain. So although it looks very old school and presents as Morgans always have, it's fascinating how they're making such a classic car relevant in a modern world.
You feel you're managing everything about it. It's so light and agile that you really do feel plugged in and part of the car. It's not great, there's no put your left foot, it's always hovering over the clutch and you feel a bit sort of driving a Defender with your elbows out and you have to take the doors off. But it's a lovely thing to be in, but it's not just here because it's a lovely thing, it's actually a really well sorted car.
Wow. I'm just enjoying driving on a great road, great scenery, no pressure to do anything fancy, just in a lovely sports car, threading it down a great road.
I've really fallen for it. It's not perfect by a long shot, but it's a lovely car with a great personality.
I think it'll be a complete left field car in amongst you get out of a Morgan and into a McLaren or vice versa. That's going to be quite a culture shock, but I think that's the beauty of Car of the Year. We can do that.
I've come round to McLaren quite slowly. I've driven a few excellent ones now, but my first go in this Artura, it feels really well balanced. It's always had great steering, and that's front and centre of the joy of that car. Lovely interior, fabulous driving position, clear instruments, great visibility, comfortable seats, and of course fantastic steering, hydraulic power assisted steering. And although some cars have really perfected E-Pass these days, when you get back into a car with really good H-Pass, you notice it, and this has really good H-Pass. It's very approachable. There's nothing spiky about it. You drive it gently, it drives gently. It's got a lovely ride. So this is in battery mode at the moment. You can go to sport. And it's extremely rapid in proper supercar performance. So you have this terrific bandwidth, and in the wet, it's very approachable still. There are some cars here that feel really stiff and positive in the dry, but come the wet, you just want to feel your way in, and it's quite difficult. There's not that much feedback, and the responses are quite robust. This just has a little bit of give, a fantastic steering feel, so you feel more confident quicker. I think the Aston Martin, the M4, and even the 911 are just not as comfortable in all conditions. They're all just a little bit too stiff. So the drivetrain feels a lot more refined these days and has a bit of character as well. So yeah, I was surprised, very pleasantly surprised. And it was almost straight away it's into my top 3, which I wasn't expecting at the start. It's obligatory. Tunnel, supercar, windows down, high revs.
There's quite a lot of familiarity about the M4 CS, and there's still a lovely feel like the M3 CS last year. The steering is almost there's a lightness to it, but a bit of a looseness, and certainly more feel than in the Aston, which has probably similar weighting but less feel. There are a lot of similarities with the M3 CS last year. It doesn't feel like it's got quite the magic of other CSs we've had in the past. Obviously, we had a couple of cars that have done very well with M5 CS and the M2 CS brilliantly. Perhaps the biggest difference with this compared to the M3, certainly straight away, is the fact this is on Cup 2R rubber, which is pretty extreme for the road. It's got nice dry roads today, and you certainly could argue that it's too much, but I really like that sense of a tyre that you have to work with and really feel sort of warm up and cool down. There are quite a few comparisons you can actually draw with the Aston Martin. Obviously, both front engine cars, the steering wheels in both, certainly in this. I love the Alcantara, but it's too chunky. It's something we've been saying about BMWs for ages. It just gives a slightly almost slightly clumsy feel, which is completely at odds with the rest of the car, to be honest. Something else you always have to spend a few minutes doing when you get into this is working out just what mode you want to be in, because there is so much choice. Once you've worked it out, you can just set and forget, really. One of the other things I love about this, and it's sort of easy to forget in some ways, this is such a usable car. It's got proper rear seats in it. You can live with it every day so easily, and yet you've got all this tactility and enjoyment and, well, performance in it. It does disguise its weight so well. There's a litheness and an agility about it, which is very surprising if you just look at the numbers on a piece of paper.
Huge capability, but don't have that rapport with it that I want to sort of drive it all the time, like most of the other cars here.
But yeah, you sort of think, this is just a box ticking exercise of how we can rinse some customers of more money. But the CS project, as it were, over the last 5 or 6 years, has really delivered some quite astonishing machinery. But one thing, colleague James made a very valid point this morning. You can drive it, enjoy it, have a great drive, get out of the car bubbling and enthusing about it. But sometimes you think, well, I've kind of driven that, I've got everything out of it that I know I'm going to get from it. It's given me everything that I want to do on a road, in a road car. You don't pass up the opportunity to drive such cars, but I don't think it's one that there's going to be a fist fight for the keys for.
There's a lot to like about it, but to me it's not hitting the highs of other CSs.
I was really keen that the Mustang Dark Horse was part of this test because I drove it in the United States, in North Carolina. There was a little bit of a compromised launch. We didn't get quite as much time on the road as we'd liked, but we got a bit of seat time at the circuit. And I'm a huge fan of the old Mustang Mach-1. I really, really love that car. It's got so much character. And to me, the Dark Horse felt like a slightly more together, more agile, more kind of polished version of that car. So I'm really keen to see what it's like in Europe, because there's still a bit of a mystery around that car, and well, we'll know by the end of this week.
I am having fun driving it. This is the first chance I've had to drive it a little bit quicker. In the space of about 5 minutes, I've done more corners than I did on the whole US launch. So already discovering more about it, and I'm liking what I'm finding. It's quite playful as well. It will move around, not in a, you know, Larry kind of way. It does feel more agile than that one. The way it changes direction is a bit more immediate, and there's a bit more polish to its handling, I'd say. I mean, early days, it feels very together in the corners, really stable. It kind of settles quite fast. Normally with a big, heavy, relatively soft car like this, you can feel it kind of wallowing, and it takes a while to take a set, but this one, you get it into the corner and it settles quite quickly, and you always know where you are with it. It just feels less of a big character than I thought it would. It feels a bit more subdued.
The Dark Horse handles more like a European car, which I wasn't expecting. It doesn't feel that fast, because you look at the spec and it's 500 horsepower, but I think it's the gearing just takes that occasion out of the engine somehow. Dark Horse, it just feels like a slightly smaller, more wieldy, more willing car to be hustled along, and yet it still retains a lot of the things that we love about American cars that we don't get from the European equivalent. The weirdest thing about this car though is the gearbox. It's a 10-speed automatic, which seems ridiculous when you've got a 5-litre V8 under the bonnet. I don't know if you can hear this with the gear shift. So that's first. Second, hardly a drop. Third's hardly a drop. Fourth, fifth, sixth. I had a really good drive in this car yesterday morning, leaving the hotel. We have like a 2-hour drive to the location we were using yesterday, and it, on a mixture of roads from motorways, fast flowing road through the valley, and then some really good fun switchbacks through the mountains. And I was really surprised at how well and it would change direction, and the balance and the steering feel, and things that I wouldn't necessarily in my mind associate with a Mustang or expect from a Mustang. That was the kind of pleasant surprise, if you like, with the Dark Horse. I'm conflicted because there's bits of it that are much better than I expected. There's bits of it that just seem totally out of character.
The reason we're at the circuit is not to set lap times or do any kind of data gathering or performance testing. It gives us a safer environment to see what these cars do towards the limit, so we're not taking any risks on the road. We get a better idea of the ultimate balance of all of these cars.
It very rarely changes anything hugely, but it's if you've got questions about a car, it's nice to be able to come back to a track and answer those, I think.
So yeah, it's quite an important feature, the track, although it doesn't actually influence the overall result very much.
First, it's great to have Evo down here for their Car of the Year. I've been keen to expand our Motorsport Vision MSV group with the circuits. We've got 6 circuits in the UK, as some of your viewers will know. We've got Brands Hatch, Donington, Alton Park, Cadwell Park, Snetterton and Bedford Autodrome. Although the circuit was only built in 2011, it had had no investment since then, so it was all pretty tired. I spent the first sort of 6 months just seeing what it was like, but very rapidly it was clear it had too many slow corners. So I redesigned it a bit on a kind of napkin at lunchtime one day. But now we've got a circuit that I think it's got a great layout. It's challenging, it's not straightforward to drive, which is really what drivers like too. You always want to do another lap, but it's fast, flowing, sweeping. We've generally got, as we have today, we've got great weather. It's not as hot and baking as in the southern part of Spain, but the weather's certainly a lot better than in the UK. So I think we've got a great circuit now, and I'm very proud of it.
Okay, heading out onto the Navarra circuit in the Aston Martin Vantage. It's not a track car, this is not a car built for track days, but it's a testament to how dynamic this thing is, that it works really well on a circuit. It's got a really positive front end on it, turns in really, really well. It's just so positive, this car, I absolutely love it. The exhaust in its noisiest mode as well. Loads of traction, that e-diff finds so much purchase. Still on the brakes, late-ish into here, bearing in mind it is a road car, not a race car. I mean, it stops well. Yeah, front end grip is brilliant. This is on tyres that have had a fairly hard time over the last couple of days. Changes direction really well. I mean, what's not to like? Wow. So if I hadn't touched that curb, it would have just gripped and gone. This e-diff works really, really well. This car's been designed around its new Michelin 5S tyres. Aston Martin's worked together with Michelin on them, and they work so well. You can really feel where the edge of the grip is. Rides the curbs well too. Honestly, for a car that's not meant to be a track car, this works pretty well on the track. Honestly, I would quite happily drive this car all day.
It's got all the ingredients that you could want. Amazing engine, which you know all about. Manual gearbox. I haven't felt quite as wowed by it as I did with the GT3 RS that we had last year. I don't know whether it's something to do with the 992 body perhaps not sort of suiting it sort of quite so much. It feels still really stiff and racy. So this is celebrating 60 years of the 911. It's sort of Porsche's birthday present to itself. In its original form, the ST was kind of a competition car. So the S stood for, well, for RS, which had the biggest engine at the time, and the T was the lightweight one, so that's where the T comes from. So most amount of power, least weight, cracking formula really, but a lot of them were used for circuit racing and rallies and hill climbs and stuff like that. So although this is a road car, there's some sort of, well, circuit history there at least. And obviously this has various RS parts on it, like the RS's front wishbones and obviously the RS's engine. So 518 brake horsepower, the most powerful iteration of this naturally aspirated flat six. But the difference with the ST is it's the first time that this engine's been combined with the manual gearbox, and we have the carbon clutch to reduce the inertia. There is real edge to this chassis actually. There is something just so wonderfully competition about this drivetrain. And the sound of it, absolutely glorious.
The Audi that I loved on the road, and I know it's not a track car, but it does feel quite big, and it's got some magic on the road which I didn't enjoy so much on the track.
But the M4, it's so hard to relax with it. Fantastic traction, of course, four-wheel drive. But then you get to the first corner and it's so bright on the steering, but with so little feel or feedback, you really don't know where you are with the car. You know, cup 2Rs for a car in the UK with our bumpy roads and our wet roads, it's just not ideal.
The Mustang. The second and third subsequent times I drove it, because I knew what to expect, I knew the gearbox was there, and you can sort of overlook it a bit and enjoy the rest of the car. And actually there's a lot to like about the steering and the general balance of the car. So it sounds good actually, sort of particularly when you're outside it. But at the end of the day, it just didn't quite gel, certainly with that gearbox for me.
It's just a breath of fresh air, and not just because it's completely different and it's a bit of an old school approach. I just love its character and its personality. It almost senses if you're a little bit nervous or apprehensive about it, and it will kind of try to dictate to you how you should drive. But if you sort of grab it by the scruff of the neck, it's like, oh, okay, this is what you want to do. And it really comes to you, and it's a lovely car just to push. It's not perfect by a long shot. But it's a lovely car with a great personality.
It's the only kind of test that I had as much fun following as I did driving. It's an absolute hoot, that car, and it's so simple and pure and true. It's like it's completely consistent, whether it's pouring with rain, brilliant sunshine. It was amazing fun here at the racetrack, great in the mountains, great on the fast sweeping roads, and everyone in the test had a brilliant time in it, which I think is testament to the car, because it's a very modest thing on paper. It's, you know, easily the least powerful car, but there's just some magic in that, particularly now they've just the fine tuning that they've done with the steering, the damping, the diff, and yeah, it's just such a sweet thing.
So the Yaris is a rally rep turned into a road car, and I think it nails that. It's really gutsy, loads of torque, punchy, great chassis, wet or dry. So you can really get involved with it. Lovely gear shift, really weighty gear shift. So I think they've refined the original car in just the right way.
We've spent the last few days driving on some fabulous roads up in the mountains, but we're here at Navarra just to explore the car's performance that little bit further, particularly the quick stuff like the McLaren Artura. 690 horsepower, V6 hybrid, as you can hear, in track mode. So it really starts to come to life and be a much more expressive car. It's incredibly linear, the power delivery. That hybrid assist just gives you so much shove out of the corners, and the V6 is quite not flat in a bad way, but it doesn't have a discernible crescendo, which maybe some people might miss. Yeah, it's got more character than the early Artura we drove a few years ago, coupe. I think if the Artura can be criticised for anything, it works so well as a general road car that when you want it to be that extraordinary car, it just struggles to really express itself in a way that maybe you would expect from a 700 horsepower mid-engine car that looks the way this does and drives the way this does. It's hugely capable and competent, and they've made so many changes and improvements, but it just didn't excite me in the way I thought it would or should. Actually, driving it on the track just confirmed how I felt about it on the road, but I knew that I'd driven it as fast as I could or wanted to, and it still just didn't have that spark.
So gentlemen, end of the week, 4 days in lovely Spain, 3 days on the road, a day at Navarra. wonderful facility. Time for the scores. 93. Dickie?
90.
90 as well.
89.
92.
93.
90.
81.
96. It's not even the top scorer. 92 from me.
87.
85.
83.
89.
Cast all our votes. So it's results time for Car of the Year 2024. In 9th place was the Ford Mustang Dark Horse. Overall score out of 100 was 84.2. Ahead of that was BMW's M4 CS. That finished on 86 points. Alongside the Morgan +4, same score as the BMW, but I think that's a great achievement for the Morgan. 6th, maybe surprising for some people, was the Toyota GR Yaris on 89 points. In 5th place was the Audi RS6 GT on 90.4 points. 4th, the Aston Martin Vantage, 91.6 points. And then we get to the podium spots. And this year we have 2 cars that finished on 92.6 points, and they were the McLaren Artura Spider and the Mazda MX-5. 2 ends of the spectrum of open top motoring, but 2 cars that just really nailed their brief, which leaves the winner on 92.8. That's how close it was this year, just 0.2 in the point scoring. It was Porsche's 911 ST. The GT3 RS from last year set the bar really high. I don't think the ST has reached that bar, but the ST this year just did enough to take the top spot.
I love pretty much everything about it. I scored it lower than I did the RS the previous year, but the throttle response and the engine note and the gear shift, I always get in that car and just have a connection with it.
It is just such a brilliant package. What a noise. For that alone, almost, it makes your spine tingle and is hard to ignore.
It's so capable, so exciting. It's a really kind of raw car, quite intense. You really have to concentrate while driving it, and it demands a lot of you. Yeah, there's just some magic in it.